Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. I'm Jamey, that's Heath, that's Robert. We're now taking a look at the roster trends of the moves that you made on CBSSports.com leagues on Tuesday night. Remember, a lot of leagues run waivers on Wednesday, so this will give you a good indication of the players who are most added, most dropped, and most traded. Certainly some options that you can be looking at for your leagues as well. Let's start with the list of most added players, and you'll see some defenses and some kickers and things of the like, which we will tend to ignore. But I do like the option here of Jalen McMillan being picked up. Now, he was rostered in less than 10% of leagues, so understandable why he's been added in so many leagues. Same with Juwan Jennings. We spent some time talking about it. Let's just revisit it here, and we'll throw in Rashad Bateman. So, Heath, when you look at McMillan stepping into a huge opportunity, we don't know exactly how it will all shake out, and the Bucs can still trade for a wide receiver. You look at Juwan Jennings stepping into a potential big opportunity when Owen's going to play with a hip injury, or Rashad Bateman, who quietly has been very good for the last month, has had some big games, big touchdowns for the Ravens, and is tied to Lamar Jackson. Of that trio, who do you like the best?
I would view Bateman as the guy that's the consolation prize. Like, should not cost you as much fab. If I don't get Jennings or McMillan, I'm okay with Bateman. He's number 3. Number 1 for me is going to be Juwan Jennings. Now, he might not play this week, but when he's healthy, there's a chance that we just see enormous production from him. It's always been one of the most efficient offenses in football. I think the risk maybe with Tampa Bay that I don't see with San Francisco as much is it's possible that they lose Godwin and Evans, and Baker's just not very good anymore. Like, the pass offense just isn't good. I trust San Francisco and Shanahan to keep that system rolling.
Robert, I want to ask you about the quarterbacks that are picked up here. Russell Wilson and Tua Tagovailoa. They're both coming from different places. Clearly, Russell making his first start last week against the Jets and scoring over 28 fantasy points and looking like he's going to keep the job for the remainder of the season, at least for the foreseeable future. And then Tua is expected to return in Week 8 after dealing with the concussion from Week 2. Take me through both of those scenarios. Can you trust Russell Wilson moving forward as a potential fantasy starter? And are you back in on Tua, knowing that the upside is clearly huge, led the NFL in passing yards last year, but there's a lot of risk if he does get hurt once again?
First of all, I'm all the way in on Tua. You just got to look at the weaponry that's around him and the production that the Miami Dolphins have put out there when he's been the starting quarterback. So there's no doubt that I'm all the way in on Tua. Much more cautious on Russell Wilson right now. Had a good game this last week in his first start. We get all of that. But is that going to be sustainable for the Pittsburgh Steelers? If you think about the Pittsburgh Steelers offensively, historically, they haven't had a sustainable offense, particularly in the passing game. But things can change when you have a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback like Russell Wilson. If you do roster him, he's more of a bench guy, maybe in a 2-quarterback league or even a 1-quarterback league.
Does have a very good matchup against the Giants, and then they finally get to start to play some games in the AFC North, the only team yet to play in a division opponent in the NFL, but that's coming up in a couple weeks for them. They get Washington after their bye in Week 9, so things looking good for Russell Wilson right now. Hopefully takes advantage of the Giants' defense, and I agree with you 100%, Robert. Tua Tagovailoa can be a league winner, so pick him up. He should be the most added quarterback. Let's take a look at the most dropped players, and these are guys that we've seen. DeAndre Hopkins, for example, was dropped in a lot of leagues in the last couple of weeks. Now you're going to be running to add him, as we saw on the most added list. The injured players, understandably so, Ayuk, Godwin, Shaheed, they're out for the rest of the remainder of the regular season. Heath, we didn't really talk about the rest of the Chiefs receiving core here. So Juju Smith-Schuster dropped. Is that a smart move, or would you hold on to him if you can?
I would like to hold on to him, but the combination of the injury where he's just immediately ruled out for the following week and his injury history, and then the fact that the Chiefs go get DeAndre Hopkins, I understand why people are dropping Juju. It's just you need to understand that there's a possibility that in 2 weeks you're dropping DeAndre Hopkins and picking up Juju because Hopkins couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah, just keep an eye on, hopefully, I always hate when players are ruled out on Monday before practice because that's bad. And Juju's hamstring injury, remember, he popped up on the injury report last week, re-aggravated the injury during the game against San Francisco, and Monday Andy Reid said he's not playing this week, so just something to keep an eye on there. So I understand why people are moving on from Juju Smith-Schuster. Robert, we saw Isaac Guerrero on the most dropped list, understandably so. We thought maybe he would play last week in place of Jordan Mason. This really isn't about Guerrero. I just want to get your take on the backfield for the 49ers, because we're not going to talk about that in the running back roundtable, but McCaffrey, when he comes back, what are we expecting? It's been a long layoff. He's got the Achilles injuries that they're monitoring. Is it going to be the same old Christian McCaffrey, or are we going to see a split backfield between him and Mason when he does play, which hopefully will be after their bye, which could be Week 11?
I think you'll see a split carry line share there between McCaffrey and Jordan Mason when he first comes back, just because they want to get McCaffrey, get his, some tread on the tire, things of that nature. But as the season progresses, getting closer to playoffs and things of that nature, once he's got his legs under him again, expect Christian McCaffrey to get the lion's share of the carries and hopefully get back to his whole old self as far as playing in terms of that. But when he first gets back, I think it'll be split between him and Mason.
And we're going to, again, take a lot of your questions. Use the hashtag AskFFT on Twitter, X. A question about, trading away McCaffrey if you're sub 500 on your fantasy league. If you're above 500, that's the guy to go try and get because he could be a difference maker for you to help win your playoffs. Heath Cummings is a Christian McCaffrey manager that is trying to sell and salvage his fantasy season. So Heath has some perspective on that as well. Let's take a look at the most traded players here. And we've seen McCaffrey and Jordan Mason on this list for a good portion of the season. You got Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper, two guys that were traded in real life last week on top of the list. Heath, when it comes to Kareem Hunt, is he a sell-high candidate for you? Because we don't know when Isaiah Pacheco's coming back. Schedule gets a little bit brutal at the end of the season, but he's been so productive because he finds the end zone and really has been the most consistent fantasy option for the Chiefs for the last 3 weeks.
I think these are the types of guys that scare you to both trade away and to trade for because you're right, we don't have a lot of information. If Isaiah Pacheco is not able to come back this year or is not able to become the starting running back for the Chiefs again this year, then I think Kareem Hunt might be a top 15 running back the rest of the way this offense is currently functioning. But it's also possible that Pacheco could be starting in just a couple of weeks. So yeah, I think it depends on whether or not Kareem Hunt is a luxury for your team or not. If you're set at running back and you're good at flex and he's just kind of a luxury, then certainly go try to sell him, turn him into something where you can upgrade a starter at another position. But if you're counting on him and he's helping you win games right now, I'd just keep starting him.
Robert, take me through as a Marvin Harrison Jr. fantasy manager, how you feel about him right now, because he got off to a shaky start in week 1, bounced back the next 2-3 weeks and started producing at the level I think fantasy managers were hoping. But last 2 weeks have been frustrating. The concussion 2 weeks ago, disappointing game against the Chargers last week. Are you looking to, if you did not have him, acquire him? And as a Marvin Harrison Jr. fantasy manager, are you looking to sell him the minute he has a good game?
I traded him. I traded him already, Jamey, a couple weeks ago. And it's all about consistency for me. It's all about consistent production. I've got to know that you're going to be there on Sundays. He's got, all the intangibles and things of that nature. But you mentioned it. It's just been up and down. And for me as a fantasy manager, I'm looking for somebody that I can depend on each week. I can't depend on him, and I certainly can't depend on Kyler Murray to throw him the football. All right. So I would be looking to sell him, which I already did, as a fantasy manager who has Marvin Harrison Jr. right now.
I do think he's the type of wide receiver. Well, Robert's right. He's not going to be consistent. He's going to have big spike weeks. So if you're of the same mind that you don't want to have this inconsistent player, I probably wouldn't sell him after a couple of down weeks of poor performance. I'm probably just going to leave him in the starting lineup, know that I might get 30, I might get 3, but when I get 30, then I'm looking to sell.
It's just interesting to see. Malik Neighbors got off to such a great start. Brian Thomas has been very consistent. I'm sure there's a lot of fantasy managers in dynasty leagues, some long-term keeper leagues, and certainly redraft leagues that have some buyer remorse on Marvin Harrison Jr., where he was drafted by comparison to those other 2 rookies. Let's just hope that he starts to pick it up and play at a high level. Schedule does not get very favorable for him, including this week against Miami, based on just how they defend wide receivers from a fantasy points allowed to the position. We're going to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. coming up in a little bit when we get to start bench cut. Let's take one of your questions here. Again, we're going to spend a lot of time at the end of the show answering your questions with our mailbag, but use the hashtag AskFFT if you'd like to get to us. Is Sam LaPorta droppable, or does the Jameson Williams suspension keep him relevant? So, Robert, we got Jameson Williams suspended for the next 2 games, expected to be suspended for the next 2 games. I don't think it's official yet. But does Sam LaPorta benefit? Because last year, Williams did not do very much, and we saw great production from LaPorta. Right now, LaPorta's been struggling.
LaPorta is definitely not droppable. He'll definitely be in a better position that Williams is suspended. But even if Williams wasn't suspended, I would be looking to trade LaPorta before just releasing him to free agency. Try to get something back for him.
We actually, in the league I share with Adam Azer, where he dropped Caleb Williams for Tank Bigsby, we actually have Kyle Pitts as our starting tight end. And I noticed this morning that someone did drop Sam LaPorta, and he was available. And I told Adam, we should drop Andy Dalton, like we should have dropped him before, so that we could go get Sam LaPorta. Adam wasn't that excited. I think he would rather have Pitts than LaPorta. I'd at least, if I see him on the waiver wire, I want to add him and see if maybe, because he's still a very talented player, the Lions just aren't throwing very much right now.
It would be nice to see him benefit these next 2 weeks, and then maybe you sell him after that, because we saw what the first part of the season has been. I thought he turned the corner a little bit when he had the 4 catches in the game against Seattle when Goff only threw 18 passes, and then he has the big touchdown the following week against Dallas. Then he goes back to, unfortunately, doing nothing last week against the Vikings. So hopefully this is a week for Sam LaPorta to deliver maybe the next 2 weeks without Jameson Williams there.